is here in Ferguson and was here back in August as well. Jim Ferguson, first of all, Jim Ryan, I'm sorry, in Ferguson. I hope you were safe last night. Did you make it through all right?
Sure, yeah, it was quite dramatic there in front of the police station at Ferguson. Two police cars were burned, objects were thrown at officers. Eventually, you heard gunshots in the crowd, and then the police responded with tear gas and responded with their armored personnel carriers, and an extremely dramatic scene. And then as that disturbance spread to West Florissant Avenue out here where I am now, several arsons were set. We know of at least 61 people who were taken into custody, charges including arson, unlawful assembly, assault, unlawful possession of firearms. The charges go on, and just over a dozen, I believe 16 people were treated for various injuries, none too serious, and none were with gunshot wounds.
Yeah. All right, let's first talk about the police. At their news conference at some point last night, they almost made it a point to say that they were overwhelmed, and at some point early on in the night, they made a decision to just more or less take a defensive position.
Well, earlier during the day, I mean, there was a large demonstration in front of the police station. A group of several dozen people broke off from that and marched about half a mile down to Airport in North Florissant, and that's where they staged a protest blocking traffic. That was allowed. The police said there would be some tolerance for people committing acts of civil disobedience like that, minor crimes, which normally would get you a citation, even get you arrested. It did not last night. The police came. They told those demonstrators to clear the intersection, and they did. They got onto the sidewalk, marched back over to the police station to await the word from Bob McCullough. Once that announcement was made, of course, you know that things degenerated into looting, into arson. Bob McCullough was still talking, laying out the reasons for the no bill in this case, and all hell broke loose, essentially.
Yeah.
They were saying that the chief, they were saying that, and as you can see from the video, the looting and the damage was much worse than it was in August. Can you kind of give us an idea of what it's like now?
Things have quieted down substantially. I finally left at about midnight last night, and things have cooled down substantially in the last 6 hours or so. Don't know if any fires are still burning here this morning, and I suspect the fire department is preparing for new calls this morning related to that. But it has cooled down quite a bit, and perhaps because it did cool down. It's 29 degrees now, and I think essentially people who were out in the street last night have gone home.
A lot of people want to know why the fires continued to burn. Aren't the firefighters saying it was unsafe because of all the gunfire?
It was, yes, and there in front of the police station, I was hearing lots of gunfires in the neighborhood and the surrounding area, and quite close within the crowd. And I think the fire department was concerned about that, was concerned about moving in. I saw at least one woman who was having heart problems, was carried down toward the police lines to get her some medical help, and immediately more tear gas was fired in our direction. So, yeah, it was quite chaotic.
Did you see any National Guard members at all?
I do not, but again, their main role, as we know from yesterday, was to keep an eye on power substations. I had not heard previously that the Halloween night power outage here in Ferguson was probably the result of sabotage. That was the suggestion yesterday from the governor. So really the National Guard was brought in to try to watch those pieces of infrastructure. I did not see them there last night. It was primarily St. Louis County that was in charge of securing the police station.
I'm going to ask you an impossible question, so I apologize before I ask it, but how many peaceful protesters were there, and how many people were not there to peacefully protest? Any way to answer that question?
Not really. I mean, the whole crowd, I think, seemed agitated. Most people did. And I watched as some, families and some people who clearly were there for peaceful reasons, leaving fairly early on. And I think that it was kind of a hardcore group that stayed behind
50,
and then engaged the police.
Yeah, 50 people, 100 people, 20 people, any close approximation at all?
You mean those who were?
Yeah, those who stayed and were there to at least watch the worst part of it.
Probably a few dozen. I think maybe a few dozen. I saw two guys being arrested for arson after the two police cars had been set on fire. I think. I mean, it's sort of a very broad group, and you saw this in August as well. That the demonstrations that start out peaceful someone in the crowd does something and then it just turns around.
Yeah. What happens today? Do you think? I'm asking you to sort of predict the future, and nobody can do that. Did you talk to any protest leaders who are going to stick around, looking for more damage today? What is the idea for the next day or two?
Well, I suspect if August was any indicator, then there will be more demonstrations today. Of course, the hope, everyone's hope, I think, at least in terms of law enforcement and people who live here, is that it stays peaceful. We'll just have to see. There's just no way to predict.
Yeah, Jim Ryan, ABC News correspondent. Stay safe out there. Thanks for checking in, Jim.
Thank you.
All right, 627 here, Big 550 KTRS. There's going to be a news conference at 6:30 on the corner of Grand and Arsenal in the city of St. Louis, down in the Shaw neighborhood. We talk about Ferguson. We talk about Delwood and some of those unincorporated areas up by New Halls Ferry Road, but also let's not forget South Grand. Some damage was done to there's an AT&T phone store there on South Grand. There's a St. Louis bread company there. There's a couple of pawn shops right there on the corner of Grand and Arsenal, the corner of Tower Grove Park over there. And then let's not forget that they shut down Highway 44 last night. And it looked like at some point that they had some type of semi-truck sort of blocked in where the semi-truck could not leave, and they just sort of surrounded that semi-truck.
It was a huge crowd on 44.
Yeah.
You know what bothered me? This was kind of early on, but it was still probably around 9-ish. I saw a couple of young kids out there.
That's what Jim Ryan was saying, and they were saying last night some parents brought their children down to watch
That's just a no-no.
to watch the protests.
That's just...
Not to mention that it was...
You can see how quickly things can get out of hand, and if you have a child down there, you just never know what can happen.
Not to mention it was freezing cold last night.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with the kid out in the cold weather, wanting to watch the...
If you're there for any type of history lesson or something, you can do it in a much better way.
628 here, Big 550. All right, if we can get to that news conference here in the next couple of minutes, we will certainly bring that to you here. Walter Knoll.